We've got to protect our children. They need our hands. We've got to stand up. Yeah, stand.
Hey, M3 family, Ian Mitchell here, and I will tell you this is going to be a tough one. The topic we're going to talk about is something that Chris Graham, my guitarist, has been asking me to do for a while. And of all the child protection topics, this is probably the toughest, and it's about child sextortion. It's where kids are getting duped into sending pictures of themselves, and then they get caught and they get extorted for money, and it sometimes leads to suicide. It's a tough conversation. For that reason, this is another one of those conversations to have headphones on or to have this conversation not around people, but this is a must. This is a must listen to. I'm joined by Representative Brandon Guffey, my friend Freddy Massimi, and we're having this conversation and in a way that's so reachable. We're going to talk about tragedy, and we're going to talk about hope. So this is just one of those that everybody needs to listen to. Everybody needs to watch. So this is not an easy one, but of all the series, this is maybe the most important one. So thank you for being a part of this show, and thank you for your attention on this. This is one that we've got to get the word out to protect the ones we love the most dear. Thank you, Bree, for everything, and let's get into it. Hey guys, so thank you for being here, Freddie, Brandon. It is a blessing to have both of you to talk about a really difficult topic, but I know one that we need to share. So I'm joined by two friends of mine. Freddie, I've known really well. We're both fraud fighters, and Brandon, I got a chance to meet you at Fraud Fight Club conference almost over a year ago, and then since then, you and I have been involved a little bit. You came down to a meeting that I was at about 6 months ago, and it's been great to get to know you, just to see what you're doing. But maybe we start with just quick introductions. And Brandon, why don't we start with you? Maybe tell the group a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Brandon Guffey. I am currently a House rep in South Carolina. Shortly before I took office, I lost a son due to sextortion. So my life's mission is focused on trying to protect kids online.
Thank you. And then Freddie.
Yes, my name is Freddy Massimi III. I'm a fraud fighter at first. I'm a father of a 5-year-old son, a member of the Noble Network, and also do a little work with a company called Deliver Fund, and also work for a financial institution.
So we're going to have a conversation that is obviously very tough, but I was telling you guys beforehand, my guitarist, Chris Graham, has been telling me over and over again, Ian, when are you going to cover this tough topic of sextortion? Because he just feels like this needs to get out more. And I know there's been a lot more awareness now over the last several years, at least a year, than before. But can we start with just what this crime is a little bit? Maybe I don't know, maybe Brandon, would you mind starting off with just talking about what the crime is?
Yeah, I mean, sextortion, I whenever I'm talking to kids, one of the things I ask them, if I ask them if they know what sextortion is, many of them don't raise their hands. So then I ask, well, do you know what catfishing is? And they all seem to raise their hands. And essentially it is whenever someone pretends to be another person online, often, a student at a nearby school that is friends with numerous amounts of your friends, that come in and start flirting back and forth, which is an uncommon, and convince you to share images, or they may even share images first. And then once you share these intimate images, they begin to blackmail you. And that's where, it is extortion. But since it is of a sexual content or sexual nature, that's the reason it is referred to as sextortion.
Do we just age groups that they target? We say kids. Is it like 8-year-olds, or is it I've heard stats myself, but yeah, what's the age group that typically gets caught up in this?
It really, I mean, honestly, there's different terms for different age groups. So a lot of it may call romance scams for the older crowd. But well, let me say this. It started off with traditional sextortion, which was typically targeting young females and convincing them, once they had images of them, what they would do is just say, if you don't send me more pictures, then I'm going to share these. They would gather these pictures, and then they would take those pictures to begin to extort teenage boys, primarily the ages 13 through 17. And they would use those pictures they get from girls to then extort the teenage boys for financial gain, demanding money instantly, even telling them to steal parents' credit cards. And that's whenever I got involved in finding out what sextortion was. Now we have transcended into a new realm of what they call sadistic sextortion. So many people have heard of these groups such as 764. And they are extorting teenagers for just their own pleasure, for sadistic reasons, whether that be convincing them to carve screen names into their arms. It's went as far as them committing suicide live on video, to calling in, fake shooters at universities, just wreaking havoc. So there's 3 different forms of it, but it seems to be getting worse and worse and targeting more and more. Whenever I first got involved, I'd never heard of sextortion in 2022 whenever I lost my son. And it was mid-August or so whenever I found out that he was a victim of sextortion. I started looking it up, and just no one was talking about it. My wife and I even had that conversation of, do we talk about it? Because this could hurt my son's reputation. But by the end of 2024, the statistics were 1 in 17 teens had been a victim of sextortion. And whenever I was talking in October in Colorado, Thorne was there, and the new stat is 1 in 5 teens have become a victim of sextortion due to the rise of AI, because they're not even getting pictures. Now they will fabricate these pictures to begin to extort them. But the fear is so real from the teens of that shame and people believing them and harming their reputation, that's causing them to be a larger target.
I'd heard of the original sextortion group, the Yahoo Boys.
Yes,
is what they were called. Those are the criminals. I mean, let's talk about the criminals themselves. What do they look like that are targeting our children?
I say it's organized crime. So at first, I'm thinking it's this creepy looking, the average thought whenever you think of a pedophile sitting in his basement targeting these kids to get images or to gain money. But what I have found is you have these groups, organized crime groups, such as the Yahoo Boys, which work very similar to an organized crime unit, where you have base soldiers that are just sitting here targeting kids to raise money and then paying it up, kicking it up the line. And over there in Lagos, Nigeria, where the Yahoo Boys are, it is the value of the dollar is so much more there. And American teens, it's nothing for them to be able to get $100 or $200 from a teen. So that is big money for them. And they can extort 10 to 15 teens at a time for an individual, just exchanging. If you see some of the videos of them, there's not just one person on the phone. They may pass it off to multiple people and be in a room doing these extortion schemes themselves. But we've also seen it with these call centers. So, you're seeing the human trafficking aspect get involved to where they are trafficking people and keeping them in call centers to where they are having to work and they're running sextortion schemes. We're seeing it come from within our prisons, especially on a state level. Prisoners, and they call it Johnning in prison, in order to gain protection. They, get in a cell phone, which could cost anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 to get it in. And whenever they're wanting that protection, they're running these schemes, and they're primarily targeting a little bit older on the dating apps, especially divorced males, females, to gain more money. But it is very, very rarely that it's just one person doing this. It seems to always have a group layer to it. And unfortunately, in many of these cases, what you find is that the person that you might be paying the money to, that the teen sends the money to, it goes through 2 or 3 people, and then before it gets transferred over to crypto or sent overseas, those people are often victims of sextortion as well, that have ran out of money, that are now essentially being blackmailed, and they're being money mules, and their thought is, well, I'm keeping my pictures from being extorted or from being sent out.
Well, Brandon, first of all, I probably should open this. I'm sorry what happened to your family, but I have to just say thank you so much how you've allowed yourself to be used, you and your wife, to raise awareness on this and be one of the leading voices in the country on this topic. So just a huge thank you for that. And I know that I was inspired the first time I heard you talk at the Fraud Fight Club, just about sharing your story with a group of several hundred of the leading fraud fighters in the country. And you continue to just be such an advocate to protect children on a state and national level. And so you're hugely inspirational, and just thank you for wasn't something you ever planned on becoming an expert or a leader in this space, but you are clearly that, and you're an inspiration to all of us. So thank you so much for that. And this crime sounds unbelievably horrific. Freddie, I just think about what we've seen coming out of COVID, this machine of scamming that's been built around to steal money from people. And this is one of the worst crimes I can imagine that happens. What have you seen coming out of COVID? Like, and how did you get involved being at a bank in this fight?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I'm just like Representative Guffey, is that not many people heard of sextortion before Gavin's Law. Gavin's Law, which really made it explode. And I'll start with that story of Fraud Fight Club. One, I wanted to give you the biggest hug being a new parent after that speech. There wasn't a dry eye in that room. And then hearing it again in South Carolina in November, and I'm like, man, it hits different every single time. And during COVID, the vulnerability and the loneliness of people going online, going on dating websites. But then you have teenagers that, they wanted to go ahead and create an Instagram because they weren't in school. These college kids that are in now that are seniors. I remember asking one of them, I said, what's one thing that you could have done differently throughout your high school career? And they said, I wish I could have gone to school in person. The people that I talked to virtually, I've never met them in person before. And as you said, AI can go against us, but sometimes it can help us. And let me tell you why it can help us, Ian, is that those AI generated images, you can always pretty much say, that's not me. You're fabricating those images, and just ignore it. But then parents, I remember during COVID, I always talk, because I worked in the vulnerable adults unit. Do not delete your text messages. Keep those text messages for evidence for law enforcement. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Zelle fraud and faster payment fraud exploded by 85% during COVID, Ian, because we did not know how to verify who we were talking to.
Yeah. And I appreciate the words of encouragement. And as you were talking about how it exploded, that was one of the things with my son, Gavin. He was missing his junior year, and that is right whenever he was hitting that stage where, and we know it as men, where you start getting comfortable in who you are and accepting who you are. And that was the shocker. Gavin, as a father, you have to have some hard conversations sometimes. And me and Gavin had hard conversations because he was a bit of my wild child. And I never anticipated it getting to this level. But he had come back from a youth camp with Young Life, gave his life to Christ. We had sat down, had this long conversation that fathers yearn for, to where, it's a man-to-man conversation, and me explaining to him the difference between attraction and compatibility due to a girl that he was dating at the time. And it just seemed like he was living his best life. But it also had that whole year to where he's spending online. So he was just playing games with friends. And at midnight, he gets a message from somebody he thinks is a freshman volleyball player at a nearby college saying, hey, you're cute. And he jumps off the game to say, I'm going to chat with this girl. and by 1:40 a.m. he had taken his life. It happened so quickly. And as you were saying with, being in school, if I could go back, I used the example of it took me 30 years before I become a Christian because I thought everyone was either perfect or a hypocrite. And it wasn't until I learned that we all fall short that I could move forward. The problem is over the past decade, we as parents are not showing grace. We are not acting graceful, and our kids don't think that they have grace or that they can make those mistakes. Instead, we're saying everything you do is going to stay with you forever. So whenever I'm talking to kids, as you were talking about with it getting larger and larger within, or as they're growing, they don't want to be on social media. They don't want to have all these virtual connections, but they were kind of forced into a lot of it at that time. And they're realizing, I think, that pendulum swinging to where they have to have more one-on-one. But our generation doesn't understand that. We think it's odd to have a relationship with anybody that you've never met. However, they're growing up online. And unfortunately, we didn't understand the harms that could come from that.
I think that was one of the most surprising things I'd see after my talks. And I think both, I go and talk to the bankers and I sing songs to them and I give examples of human crimes. And one of them I talk about is the child sextortion. And I remember, now it's over 10 people after I give my talks have come up afterwards and say, this has hit my home. And these are very successful bankers, very executives and young bankers that have younger kids. They'll come up and say, hey, and it's hitting homes that are not problem homes that they have relationships with their kids, Christian homes that are very religious, homes that, there's very high functioning that doesn't have, unlike some of the other scams that really kind of create susceptibility by the loneliness and maybe they're more at-risk people. I'm seeing it hit everyone. This crime is hitting, and I think that's the part where it probably most concerned me as a parent of 3 too. And I started having those awkward conversations with my kids and being very blunt about them. But I think that's something, Brandon, you said is your son had given his life to the Lord and was also targeted. It's like, this is one that all of us are at risk for. And that's what I hear over and over again. And that's maybe one of the scariest parts about this crime.
Well, we have to be real with one another. I mean, think about whenever we were 16, 17-year-old boys. And it doesn't matter how you were raised at that time, biologically, you're not going to think straight if you have some female. And I think that's the reason the teenage boys are so susceptible. And then that fear. And just like Freddy was saying, how AI can be used good. I tell kids all the time, especially for the first 2 years after Gavin, whenever I came out with my story, I was dealing with 1 to 2 calls a day. And my number one goal was trying to get teens to go to their parents. Sometimes I would have to navigate those phone calls. I still have a hard time getting people to go to law enforcement because they feel like it gets stopped beforehand. But I try to stress the importance of putting it in there. But it is just that mindset of these people that are calling and they're in this direct fear. Imagine your most shameful moment in your mind is going to be out there for everyone to see. But now with AI, you can sit there and say, that isn't me. Like, man, I wish I looked that good without clothes on. That isn't me. And everyone, we can sit here and say, don't take pictures. Our parents told us not to do things and we still did it. It's understanding the ramifications of it. And as I travel around speaking, I started a nonprofit called Less Than 3, which that was the only symbol Gavin sent out before he took his life. And it just looked like a heart on a black screen. And, our message is tomorrow needs you. So if studying...
Can you repeat that again? Your message is, what is it?
Our message is tomorrow needs you.
Tomorrow.
And such a powerful message for kids to understand, because the thing I didn't realize is the majority of suicides are impulsive. We think about our service members, and I always thought suicide was something that people were struggling with. But the facts don't lie, and the majority of them are impulsive. And the average time it takes someone to make a decision to the time they commit the act is up to 20 minutes, but yet if there's a gun involved, it's as little as 3 minutes. So if we can get you to just make it to tomorrow, and I often say we as dads are great at giving advice, we're horrible at following it. But if we can all take a bird's eye view on a situation, you can often give better advice and handle it better. But if we can just get you to make it to tomorrow, those statistics drastically increase.
I love that.
Oh,
It's a beautiful
tomorrow
message.
needs you. Hey, Freddie, would you mind sharing the story? What you called me, Friday morning? I think it was last week. What happened in last week?
Yeah. So it always hits home, and I immediately called Ian, and I was like, "Look, this is what's going on. It's actually in South Carolina, Brandon. So we can have a off conversation about this. There was a stepmom of a 15-year-old son that called me, or called another member of the Noble, and this was about 8 o'clock at night. He said, "Hey, I have a 15-year-old male that's a potential victim of sextortion scams." Like, all right, so I need the details. Let me know what's going on. Was ready to go ahead and make that, referral to NCMEC as well as local law enforcement there to try to get this done. From that, we leveraged it. We got the stepmom, the father, the referral source that called me all on the phone together on a conference call for about an hour and a half. And it took about 3 hours, even with research, even searching the phone numbers that called them. So from start to finish, Brandon, they coached them and groomed them on Roblox. That's where it started. All of a sudden, he received a text message, and he said, the individual on there, and said, "Show me what you're working with." Pictures were exchanged, and from there, they
Through Discord?
yes, yep. And then what happened is they started talking about drugs and needles, and the individual, the teenager, lied to the parents, or a fear of lying to their parents, said that they were going to the movie theater, but they were really at another house. The two phone numbers that called them and that were texting, they were local phone numbers that we did find out that they were being spoofed. They actually were coming out of Nigeria. The Instagram of the particular teenager, it was created in December of 2025. He did not have many followers. He didn't have people that were following him as well. And before this, it was on public mode. We convinced him to put it on private mode. And I'll tell everybody listening to this is that if you have teenagers on Instagram, a lot of times Instagram, when you log on, it will say, look who's new to Instagram, follow them. And if they're public, anybody can follow them, even if they don't have that person in their network. And I actually just found that out recently. I'm like, holy cow. So glad I didn't grow up with social media when I was a 17-year-old boy. It came out when I was 20 years old in college. So from that, they talked about common things. There was movies and house. What do you like to do? And then what happened was there was a weird call, particular late that night, and said, "What I need you to do is I need you to go ahead and open up a Zelle or Venmo account, and I need you to send me money." Well, what happens with a 15-year-old boy? Well, where are they getting that money from? They don't have that money. As you said, they steal credit cards. They may go into cash. And the first thing I ask them is do you have weapons in the house? They says, yes, we do. Just kind of, your situation.
Secure them.
In the safe. And then we went even further. I says, do me a favor. I need you to grab your son's phone. This is what they did. They found out that they now have the Bark app on that teenager's phone. Red flag. They then had a calculator on the particular phone that if you put in a particular code to that calculator, secret images and phone numbers will come up. That was on there.
Hey, Freddie, one step, Bark. A lot of people think Bark is protecting. You brought up a solution that I even had in my house. When you said they had Bark on what does that mean?
So the Bark app is where and keep me honest on this, Brandon and Ian, is that parents can kind of monitor of what you're doing on there, but there's actually ways to kind of bypass it. And what they were doing,
there's YouTube videos to tell you how to bypass it.
Yes. And go ahead.
So the parents put it on there, and then the child was able to bypass it. It's not the criminal put it on there. Okay, got it. Okay, yep.
This isn't the same technology in that you're aware of with SafetyNet or CyberDive, where you can't really bypass it.
Correct. So they bypassed that, and then I asked them to go as far as looking in their text messages, and they said there's nothing on here. I says, okay. Now what I need you to do is I need you to go to the deleted messages. They went to the deleted messages, and I had them recover phone numbers. In that particular deleted text messages, there was a group message all in the 704 area code. That's the group message was named Papa's Kids. And all those Papa's Kids were all teenagers from the same high school. So I guided them through. I says, what I need you to do is when you take your son to school tomorrow, I need you to tell them what's going on because of it's 764, right, Brandon?
Yes.
The 764 gang are going to call in bomb threats. They're going to call in particular things that we just are scared to do to kind of, it's a distraction what they really want to happen. They then found out where the stepmom worked. She worked at a local salon where I'll say it, 2 traffickers, 2 victims, 2 mules, 2 soldiers knew exactly where the stepmom worked. And they were calling the business, asking questions. So I told the stepmom, I says, before you go in, your salon opens up at 8:30. I need you to call local law enforcement there in South Carolina and talk to them and tell them what's going on so you can do pretty much a wellness check, make sure there's nothing around the salon. So the network that we were able to talk to, Ian and Brandon, and getting law enforcement, the Noble Network, the parents, myself, the National Center Missing Exploited Children, NCMEC, we're all talked together, getting that referral in from start to finish, making sure that that teenager is protected. It could have gotten as bad as you're going to commit suicide tonight.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you do this if you don't give me the money. And when I tell people this all the time, it's kind of like a pig butchering scam that turns into sextortion. A lot of times it's not a suspect and a victim. A lot of time it's a victim and a victim that these traffickers are telling the people that are scamming these teenagers, if you don't make this amount of money tonight, I'm going to kill your family.
Yep.
It's a real threat. And, I go back to listening to your story at Fraud Fight Club, Brandon, is that, and I tell this story when I talk to teenagers on the dangers of social media, and I do it a lot at churches, my alma mater. I'm speaking in Texas in April about this. That bowling ball story, it hits me every single time. And if you're okay with me talking about that right now, are you okay with me talking about the story? Is that okay, Ian?
One of the things that I've learned is not to worry about crying in front of people. So you go ahead.
I remember he came home, and keep me honest, he came home from a congressional speaking event. He told Gavin, that he loved him. And all of a sudden it sounded like a bowling ball falling from the top shelf. And that's when he found out that Gavin, and that hits me hard as a boy dad.
I passed him in the hall right before he went into the bathroom. That's the hard part. It's like I don't know how you can get any more present,
But
just not having a clue.
Yeah, that is that is the reason we do this, Ian. That is the reason we fight fraud. That is the reason that why we keep going and telling the stories and protecting the vulnerable, protecting individuals that cannot speak for themselves. And that is the why behind we do this. That, you know, the banking with heart that you always talk about, and, you know, tomorrow wants to see you, and, you know, less than three, and the stickers on the back of my laptop right now, less than three, that you gave me, and I put a Noble sticker on that bus that you bought to South Carolina. And it's just a beautiful story that you are telling the story for Gavin, and you're continuing to live in his legacy. And I think everybody listening today needs to appreciate that, is that because some parents, they give up and they just stop, but you're living the legacy and following you on LinkedIn and social media, and listening to your podcast. I think it's called Pints and Politics. I love it because it's real, and it gives a version of the true story behind the person. It's not fabricated. You tell the story, and it's a beautiful thing to be a dad that's never giving up on their children. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. I've got, like I don't remember if I said it before or I said it during this, but dads are really good at following advice, or giving advice, but not the best at following it. And whenever I was going through and I still deal with PTSD, not nearly as much as I used to, but, you know, whenever you're in those depressed modes and you just don't want to go, I often have to think, if this was my son, which I have a 19-year-old and a 7-year-old as well, what would I tell them to do? And that's the motivation. And that helps me a lot of times. Because we as parents, we will do anything to protect our children, but yet we won't even follow our own advice. But if, you know, you're putting your son in the situation that you feel, and he's coming to you and asking you for help, and if you simply follow that advice, sometimes it's just getting up and moving. I didn't know what I was doing. You know, my background started off in tech in the early 2000s in data analytics. And then I left and started cutting grass, and doing landscaping. And so you can only imagine how much tech has evolved since then. But, you know, I didn't know what to do. The only thing I knew to do was to speak up. And if the conversation that my wife and I had before, it was, do we want to speak up? Because is this something that people will judge him over? You know, he was so ashamed of this that he took his life. Why would we kind of expose it? But it's really about saving the next Gavin. And since Gavin, there's been over 50 teens publicly within the U.S. And I know of a dozen just in the Carolinas that parents won't speak up. In addition to that, that is due to sextortion. You mentioned about deleting messages. This has become my fight with Meta. You know, I am one of the lawsuits that is challenging Meta because the person that extorted Gavin, the profile was taken down very quickly, I would say, once the subpoena was issued, but they left up all the other profiles for the individual. And Bella Janet 28 was the one that targeted Gavin. 2 days after that, Bella Janet 30 was extorting my cousin, my 16-year-old son at the time, and extorting me as well. And Meta just left it up. And thank goodness we had Instagram at that time was not disappearing messages, but now it's all end-to-end encrypted. So whenever we talk about trying to protect kids, it's not that I think Bark is a bad product. Bark is an app, and as with any app, people can go around it. That's the reason I'm real big on the screen mirror technology, to be able to see and to record like a DVR, to see what is there, and to have nudity blocks on phones. Ultimately, we aren't going to change this until we teach our kids, because tech is going to continue to try to get them younger. We can't just exclude them altogether, but what we have to do is teach them how to make wiser decisions. And if they think mommy and daddy can see everything that they're doing on their phone, they're going to make wiser decisions at a younger age. And then the parent doesn't have to helicopter parent as much. And you still have these safeguards to fall back on. I spoke at Google in November. And while I was there, the whole thing was talking about all the good Google's doing. And Google's doing a lot trying to make improvements. They understand how the algorithms have caused problems. But at the same time, they were still sending an email out to children on their 13th birthday, telling them how to update their privacy controls, essentially telling them how to disable parental controls. And I stood up and said, all these things are great, but let's just be honest about it. Y'all are still sending kids emails on their 13th birthday. Well, in January of this year, they announced they're no longer doing that. So we've got to speak up, and us parents have to.
That's the frustrating thing for me. Is like my kids get older. I notice like even we use all Apple devices that they're still considered my children and they're automatically disabled from the parental controls. Like there's so much. So can I ask one of the things I want to go back to, and then I want to get to the practical advice that you guys have for parents and guardians, but I can't get my head around, and actually I can because I've been fighting fraud for so long and scams, but I see two problems. One, Brandon, you said it's organized crime. We're up against organized crime that's international. It's happening in the US, like you mentioned, but also international. And then we're up against the lack of movement on the tech firms. Can we go to the organized crime? How is this allowed to happen? You mentioned the gangs, was it 764 gang? These gangs, if we know they exist, how are they still able to do this? I mean, just the basic question. Again, I kind of know the answer just being in the fraud fight for so long, but just for folks that are not in our field, if we know the gangs are doing this, we know where they are, how are they allowed to operate this way? What's keeping us from knocking down their doors and putting them all in prison?
You want to go, Freddie, or you want me to?
I mean, I can chime in.
You go ahead.
I'm so grateful that you went after me at IFCI, not before me. So it's exactly what it is. It's organized crime. They are so good of hiding it that it's kind of hard to actually understand where it's coming from. When someone says follow the money or follow the trail, I always tell people is sometimes it's harder than it looks. And I think, from Brandon's point of view, you see the laws and following through. And when we see it from a financial institution, sometimes it's the after the fact, Ian. Following a SAR or doing a transaction review or just simply calling a parent or a client and kind of understanding the why. Like, why did this happen to you? What was the whole story? And I think that's truly important to want to understand.
And Ian, I would equate it because I've been thinking a lot about that. That's been weighing heavy on my heart. Like, why can't we move? I'm a dad. I want vengeance. I'm ready to hire black op operators and fly in and start extraditing people either against their will. I don't care.
Over the last couple of months, they exist. Like I didn't know they existed in the United States. They exist. There's this. That's a separate conversation.
Well,
but
as we see it go to prisons now, what we're seeing is gang members get out of prisons and saying, "Man, we were making $100,000 a year using a cell phone while we were in prison. I'm going to teach these street level gangs to do this." So while it might have started off with Yahoo Boys, we're seeing it all across the globe, and now we're seeing it in actual gangs, street gangs running this. It's more profitable than selling drugs. And, and in their mind, they're not, killing someone. But those stats, like I said, 1 in 5. Think about that. Whenever it's 1 in 17, I would say that means every middle school, every high school in this country has a child sitting in it that's been a victim. Now it's 1 in 5. So, and what I was thinking about, as you guys are trying to fight it on the back end, well, how much effort does it take to track down this one person, and especially in America, because of our privacy laws, because of our First Amendment right, you can't violate someone's privacy, but if you're tracking down, how much effort does it take? And what's happening, this is essentially looting. Stealing is wrong. If one person runs into a store and tries to run out with a TV, people are going to stop them. But right now, our children are being looted. They are getting overwhelmed, and so many of these incidents are happening. Even our local law enforcement feels helpless. And thank goodness there's some technology out there. But oftentimes, what it falls back to is we don't go after these guys unless there's a death. And then sometimes whenever we do, if it goes back to like the Ivory Coast where extradition is not allowed, Gavin, we extradited one of the people in Gavin's case. Two of the other were let out just due to a judge, but the one that we were able to extradite just happened to be the third person ever extradited from Nigeria. So it's not like this is an easy process. We're 3 years from what happened to Gavin, and we haven't begun the pretrial for the person that we extradited. Law unfortunately moves slow, and we need tech companies to step up and ensure that these safeguards are in place because they're the only ones that can do it. We can't control and block these things.
Can I ask, can you build on that? Because part of this series, I've talked, we talked about Roblox. I've talked to gaming experts and other tech experts. From your perspective, Brandon, why is tech stepping up? Because I'm having these conversations, and I won't name them, with very senior people there, and they, as an individual, they're all saying, "I don't want this to happen on the platform." They're doing their best to clean it up, and I believe them when I'm talking to them. And this one, I wish I could mention who it is, but I can't. I mean, I believe that they feel like they're in their role at a very senior level at a major social media organization to fight these types of crimes. When we say tech needs to step up, I was at the UN a couple years ago, and somebody from there said finance is doing more than the big tech companies. Why is that the case? Why is that the reality? And that's the theme that keeps coming up.
If one of those people that are telling you that they're doing all that they can lost a child, they would admit to you they're not doing all that they can. And I say that plainly because whenever I made that argument with Google, are you okay with your kid getting an email on their 13th birthday telling them how to disable controls? The conversation changes, but ultimately, like you were asking, why is it that big tech isn't doing anything? It all boils down to Section 230. Section 230, written in 1996, or the Child Online Protection Act, says that essentially online companies cannot be held legally liable, which every other industry in this world you can file a civil suit against. But this says that they cannot be held liable so long as the person is 13 or older. And they'll argue and they say, that's not what it says. Well, why do you only track and use your data analytics starting at 13? You don't go below that because you could be held civilly liable. And so now it's 13. Well, now you see all the laws come out as where, big tech is spending so much money fighting these cases in court. If they just spend a fraction of what they are spending on court costs trying to defend this into protection, and it's a $1 trillion industry to market to that 13 to 17-year-old market for social media companies alone. We're not even getting into gaming platforms such as Roblox. But Roblox lobby, as a lawmaker, I can tell you, they were trying to put poison pills in every bill I put up. They were trying to tell me, we want to help you. I met with senior people at Roblox coming into my office a year and a half ago. And whenever I said, I don't believe that you should be able to track anyone under the age of 18, they come in, well, we've got to be able to know where they are. Like, that's how we put people together. And we're only marketing that one particular game to them. Well, if you know that information, why are you allowing adults to get in the room with our children? It boils down to, it is about money. And until we stand up and say, we're not investing in Apple, Google, Meta, X, any of these until y'all are putting children first, then nothing's going to change. Or we do like Lindsey Graham has done and Dick Durbin. It's a bipartisan bill, and that's what I love about tech and all the policies we work on. It's always nonpartisan. Every bill's led by one Republican, one Democrat. It's saying, we understand what you're doing, but they spend all this money on lobbying. Meta's putting $300 million to go against state reps like me, which is ridiculous. But It's the amount of money that comes through to kill these bills. And whenever I spoke to, we did there was a executive order to sunset the hemp regulations. And what that was doing was that was forcing the hemp industry and the Congress to come together to find a solution. And whenever I was meeting with Lindsey Graham, I was like, man, that's a great idea. Like, we should do something like that with Section 230. He's like, oh, yeah, I've already got a bill for it. So if we sunset Section 230, that's going to force them to come to the table. But instead, they're spending so much money trying to keep any little bill from coming forward. COSA, the Kids Online Safety Bill, a few years ago was 91-3 out of the Senate. It goes to the House. It made it through all the processes. It boils down to 2 men would not allow it to come to the floor before the clock ran out. And no one wants to vote against it, but it was the smallest step that we could make that just established a duty of care if it was under 16, and tech spent so much money fighting against it.
So, for the average person, parent, guardian, grandparent that's hearing this and is sufficiently scared and concerned about their one they love, and I would argue, I can't believe 13 is the age. I mean, there's no 13-year-old I've met that can manage privacy. I mean, it's so arbitrary. It's so ridiculous. So, and I would argue even my 20-year-old, whom I love to death, and he's so smart, but him and I've talked about this here, is he got exposed to pornography at the age of 10. I mean, it's like, and it's been a constant thing in our relationship at how do we protect our home. And so what does a guardian do? What can, and maybe Freddie, you start us off, and Brandon, I'll let you kind of have closing thoughts on like, what can we do in our homes to like actually start fighting this or protecting our homes?
It's a little different for me than it is for Brandon or you, because I do have a 5-year-old son. You guys are, a little older in the teens. But I always say this is that we have to be as firm as possible when it comes time to protecting our children online, especially because they're strangers that are coming into our house. They're seeing things on TV that, I always tell people this is that if you're going to go on YouTube and let your child watch something on YouTube, like a cartoon or something, make sure that it's an official channel on YouTube, because my son, he loves Bluey, right? Or Spider-Man. But a lot of times they'll put Spider-Man as a title, and then in between those, they're going to say, kill, 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 do this, do that. And it's just a known thing that's happening out there. So it's just very, very careful of what you do. Don't just leave your child unattended. Make sure that you're protecting them as much as you can. And, if you get accused of being a helicopter parent, so be it. Because it's a lot different now than it was when I was born in 1986. I'm turning 40 this year. And it's hard for me to understand when my son is 18 years old, how is technology going to look? These deep fakes are getting so believable, you don't know what to believe anymore. So do your research. If you have a gut feeling that something is not right, just keep investigating. See something, say something.
Yes. And I would agree with that. And I do have a 7-year-old, so I'm going through this all over again.
Yeah.
With, kids getting devices earlier and earlier. And there's no one thing that we can do whenever it comes to devices. There are tech that is coming out that we want to protect our kids with. I think the simplest rules are try to keep your kids off of a device until they're of age. And I'd say keep them off social media until 16. I'd try to keep devices out until about 13. And then whenever it's limited. But you want to make sure that those devices stay in public spaces. No device in your bedroom, no device being brought to your bathroom. If you're going to be on your social media or you're going to be on watching YouTube, it's going to be in the living room. Put in your headset and you can sit there with me where we would watch TV. One of my biggest advocates that I have with less than 3 was someone that did not understand the dangers until, um, the grandchild was watching YouTube and a choking challenge video come up and caught the grandchild trying to choke themselves. And these are the harms out there. It's not just the sextortion. It's not just the predators. A lot of times the algorithm itself is the predator because it's trying to market what your child would want to see. And that's causing a lot more harm, causing a lot more confusion. I think all three of us would agree that it's a lot harder to get information and to know what's real and what's not. This is only going to get worse with AI. AI is eliminating press because people are using AI to write it, and then AI is consuming AI, and you're not always getting what's true. So we've got to get back to having that discernment. And as I was talking to another lawmaker, we were discussing how did people do this whenever the newspaper came out and the average person could write a newspaper and they could write whatever they wanted. And that we established freedom of press. If someone was writing a lie or slander, how do you deal with it? Well, it became teaching society in whole. And a lot of that goes back to grace. I think we've got to get back to those. We've already got a book that tells us what we should do. Our Father's already given us the advice. We're just not following it. We've got to get back to those principles for one. And the other thing I would say, as a father that was so busy trying to protect my house from the outside world, it ended up being something that I'm trying to protect my house protect my household from the outside. That as a predator came in my son's bedroom, ended up being his demise inside my house. So ensure that those conversations, and it doesn't, being in the South, you raise children. It wouldn't be uncommon for me to allow a 16 or 17-year-old to have a rifle hanging on their wall. But we still have to get to that situation to where we're taking that instant moment away and having those conversations and making sure your kids know that regardless of what it is, I made the assumption that you can always come to me because I didn't think that, this is nothing as bad as what he's had to come to me before with. So why wouldn't he come to me? But I just think in his mind, it was, I can't go through this.
Gentlemen, thank you for sharing. I mean, this is, of all the conversations, this was probably the toughest, but probably the one that most needed to be talked about. We've covered gaming and the scam stuff and the grooming and the pornography issues, but this is one that is by far the scariest. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this. Brandon, where can you send whatever we need to do? I know you're part of a tech company too, and you've got some amazing things going on. Can you just share with us links and whatever you want us to include,
Yes.
so that we can figure out how to support and follow you, and maybe the name of your show, your
The Pints and Politics. Well, people might not want to follow it quite the same. And what I try to do, I call it the 8-mile approach of politics. I don't pretend that I know everything. I'm going to be open, raw, real about it. I'm just an everyday guy that was elected to represent his people. And I stay real about it instead of trying to act like this polished politician, like I know better. But then with the tech company, the company I've been working with, the technology that I love, it is CyberDive. And it is a mirror device with nudity blocking features. And people can find it at nomorenudes.com. It's an individual device, but you see everything that's on your child's phone, and you can rewind it as well. So in a situation where something happens, it doesn't matter where they tried to delete or the calculator app or anything else. You can literally see everything on the screen. And then with Less Than 3, my nonprofit is less than the number 3 sc.org. And that is my passion to the day that I die.
Well, thank you, brother, for your courage. And if you want somebody from the Cyberdive team, I'd love to talk to them about their technology and highlight it. Feel free to send somebody my way. And Freddie, same with you. If there's any kind of links and things, I know you do all kinds of volunteer work. If there's anything you want to send over our way of things that have been interesting to you, feel free to. I appreciate both of you so much. You both are courageous in your own spheres and pushing these conversations forward. Yeah, God bless you both, and I so appreciate it.
I got one more thing to say, Ian. And you don't know this, but before I ever met you, I knew you. And that was because of you setting up the Noble. And the first group that you put together trying to attack this, I participated in that. And it was one of those times where I was really struggling with PTSD, struggling with just getting up and moving. And those calls helped me get up, get going, and with a group of individuals that were actually fighting the right fight. So thank you for that.
Praise God. I didn't know that. And thank you. It is when we get to say yes to assignments and missions, we have no idea what they're about. It is unbelievably a blessing. And I try to tell everybody and remind everybody there's more of us than them. We're bad people. I get to work with so many amazing people that try to do what they do with heart and believe that there's good in all of us and want to fight. And the Noble is just one of the handful of communities that I'm aware of out there that are that are filled with those kind of people. So thank you, brother, for sharing that. That blesses me. You have no idea. I'll process that a little hard later, but that blesses me. And glory be to God, because all that wasn't my idea, because I was pretty burned out too when I was starting up the Noble. But
no, it helped me.
This fight's worth it.
I wouldn't have been able to get up and start speaking if it wasn't for that. So
if I could say one more thing too before we end, Ian, is that I always end with that awareness, quick action, and support can save lives. So talk about things. This type of crime is super underreported. And as I say, just talk about it, because someone wants to hear what's going on that can save another person if it's happening to them.
That's right. That's right.
That is true.
Yeah, hard conversations are hard to have, but we all need to be courageous and do that. Thank you guys. God bless you guys. And would love to have you both back as we start going on this adventure of how to make our homes safer. So thank you both. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Bree, for your help behind the scenes.
Thank you, man.
God bless, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So if you enjoyed the M3 show and you want to watch all the new releases, click subscribe. You know how it works. Secondly, if you want to support my nonprofit, the one I established to fight human crimes like child exploitation and human trafficking and scams, click the QR code, scan it, make a donation. That would be hugely appreciated. And if you want to stay updated on all the music, again, I release music regularly. Go and click that link in the description, and we're on every major platform: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. You can look up Ian Mitchell. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the support, and I look forward to being with you next time.
I am not done yet. I am not done yet.